Hello and welcome everyone. Our today's speaker, Yamini, Scrum Master from the Netherlands, from North Holland, from the new 10 company, is going to talk today about how did the retrospective went wrong and which insights can you get out of this situation. Yamini, the mic is yours. You're welcome.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks a lot for this short introduction. Hi, I'm Yamini. I am currently working as a Scrum Master at New 10. I have overall 4+ years of experience as a Scrum Master. And believe me, everything that I've done wrong has actually made me a better Scrum Master, handling those situations better, understanding what can be done better. So to start with, how did a retrospective go wrong? And since I had experience, I thought, why don't I validate it with the other people, other Scrum Master community? And so I actually also created a poll a few months back that was to all the other team members or Scrum or Agile people to see what do they think about this. So my basic question was, what percentage of your team's retrospectives are successful? And then there was a lot of noise about this, and there were complete mixed reactions that I got from this question. Some participants believed that retrospectives can be successful, and at other times they can simply fail, that we are not able to take value out of it. But there were some that actually even questioned the question itself, believing that it's just an opportunity to learn and not to measure success or failure. So how can you even say that you succeeded or you failed, but it's just an opportunity to learn and grow? But I would say there's no right or wrong answer to this. It's just about perspectives that everyone has. And then moving ahead, let me share a small story about this. So to give you some background, I had joined New 10 last year, and it was a new beginning. And you are always self-critical about how you're performing. Every profession, a professional has this need. When they join your organization, there's a pressure to prove that you're fitting the job, and that is no different for a Scrum Master. So I was in this zone of, I have to prove that I'm the right person for this job. I'm a good Scrum Master. I can engage the team. And yeah, I was facilitating some of the few first retrospectives with both my teams. And this was basically my meeting format. Why I'm giving you some context to understand why I had this feeling that why it went wrong or how that can be done right. That's why I'm giving you some background and how my meeting is usually designed or structured. So my basic meeting format for retrospective is I start with a small check-in activity. For example, there are very basic questions that have been put on the Miro board, like, how was your day? How are you feeling today? Or a very simple question, what distracts you today? And believe me, adding different questions every time helps people to pause, think, and just be there in that movement. Because if I just add one simple question and repeat it every time, people have prepared their answers and there's no thinking that is done, and you unconsciously just give those answers. So I try to use different questions during these check-in activities where people just like to speak about themselves. How are they feeling? Just making them feel heard and valued. Then there's the next part that is what I want to talk about. And this is basically an opportunity for the team to share if there is any recognition, if there are any announcements, if there is any kind of kudos or anything that you would like to mention. So in short, anything that is important and you would like to share it, which is related to your work and which is really important for you to share with the team. So that is booked for 5 to 15 minutes, depending upon how the team is feeling. If there is some nice, interesting topic, it goes up to 15 minutes. If not, people usually mention some things, then we move on to the next section, which is actually a retrospective activity. I love to play around with this section where rather than just having these very typical boards of what went well, what didn't go well, what we can start, what we can improve, I try to use games or other such things. And at the end, I personally believe that feedback is the biggest tool. If utilized in the right way, it can just help you accelerate growth if you focus on what needs to be changed. So I always have some time spent with the team just to collect some feedback. And it can be as simple as just put smileys on 1 to 5. Did you like the activity? Did you feel that you could express your feelings? Did you feel heard? Very simple things, and that really helps. So if the scores are low, then I explicitly have one-to-one sessions to understand what was the missing part, why weren't specific team members happy about it, and that just helps us to have an open communication about this. Because I feel even retrospective is part of the inspect and adapt cycle. Then this is basically the structure of the retrospective meeting that I usually conduct with my teams. And this time, since it was a new team, rather than adding too much fancy things or games, I started with a very basic one: start, improve, and continue. This was the retrospective activity. So yeah, what activities do you want to start? Are there any initiatives that we want to start? If improve, is there something that we're doing which can be done in a better way? And continue was the part where we wanted to focus. Yeah, this is really being helpful for the team, and let's continue doing that. So just 3 simple sections, and the retrospective started pretty well. And moving on, now here I have divided 2 parts. There's an output and outcome, and I think at the end you will come to know why I've put this as 2 different sections. So the output of this activity was the activity started well. The team added stickies across the 3 sections of start, improve, and continue. Once the team was done adding stickies, we proceeded with casual discussions. People started elaborating about what points they had mentioned, why they had mentioned certain things. And actually, no one was keeping track of time during the entire thing. And it was at the end we realized, we are just discussing the part that is in the start section, and we have not spent enough time or not spent any time at all on the other 2 sections, that is improve and continue. Based on the discussions that were done for the start section, we had some 1 or 2 action items that came out of it. We made notes of it, decided who would be the owners, what exactly needs to be done, and then collectively decided that since it was quite useful, let's continue discussion about the next 2 sections in the next retrospective, which is scheduled after 2 weeks, because our sprint cycle is for 2 weeks. So that was a collective decision taken, and I made basic notes about the retrospective and took a quick feedback, and the team was quite happy with it and moved on. Now, the climax. So as you know, every time there's a flow that happens, and then there's a climax in the story which changes everything. So the climax was the next retrospective actually got cancelled because of a company-wide event. And I think the pressure of the virtual world nowadays is we don't have enough calendar space. So squeezing that 1 hour between 70, 60 members and finding that space was just not possible. And we lost an opportunity. So the next opportunity for the retrospective came after 4 weeks rather than the 2 weeks. And yeah, so when we opened the board, the normal check-ins happened. We had our what I would like to say section, and then we moved on to our board. And it was like, yeah, during the retrospective, everyone had added stickies. But when you add stickies, we don't really elaborate, right? Because we love to talk as humans and express. And that's how the entire discussion happens. Stickies were very simple, 1 or 2 words, and there wasn't any detailed description associated with it. And frankly, quite a few didn't even remember who had added what, because we do have a tag feature. When we add stickies, you can add tags of names who have added it. But no one did that, and no one even reminded each other of doing it. So that was missed opportunity. And during the same 4 weeks, one of the team members had left the organization. So we lost a chance of having a detailed description of what that person had to say about these things. And no one knew which stickies that person had added. So after spending 10 minutes that nothing is coming out of this, we decided to quit and jump to the next game. That was an ad hoc thing that came up. Let's do Pictionary. But because of this first 10 minutes, it was quite that the team had lost the momentum of working together. And yeah, when we started with the Pictionary, there was no momentum. People weren't really interested because the impact of the last discussion, which did not go well, we had still carried that. And we had to call it off. And that was a point where I felt quite vulnerable and blamed myself for the disaster. As a Scrum Master, my main point is that I need to engage the team. I have to have that momentum. I have to make sure that the discussions go in the right way. I ask the right questions. And here I was not able to engage the team, not able to derive value out of it. And we had got this opportunity after 4 weeks. So that was quite disastrous. And if you ask me now, what would I do differently if I have to do it all over again? I have so many other things that can be done in the right way. When we were ending our first retrospective session, understanding that, oh, these are very small notes, 1 word, 2 words, I could have asked the team to, please go ahead and write more detailed things to describe it so that we can remember the context, why it was said in a certain way, or what were the points. Or when we realized that we couldn't recollect what was written, we could have simply discarded the stickies put in these 2 sections and rewritten it, because then it would be in the current context and not something old that we're trying to remember and discuss as a forceful thing. Yeah, and it is, first of all, it is, since we are building self-organized teams, the responsibility is not just on the shoulders of a Scrum Master. It is a shared responsibility. Your team needs to operate even without a Scrum Master. I think that's the paradox of this role. A Scrum Master needs to make sure that the team can operate on their own without the support of a Scrum Master. And if that's the case, it's everyone's responsibility to keep track of time. And should the team actually meet, if this was really important, and when the first retrospective happened during the feedback, it was mentioned that, it was nice, fruitful. They did find value in it. If it was that important, should we really wait for retrospectives, the planned ones, or should we really try to have some allocated slots to talk about these issues and not wait for some official event? So these are all kind of things that came up, and I would have done it completely different if I had to do it all over again. Now, what were a few of the important learnings? I think this really triggered a lot of thought and discussion. I also got an opportunity to discuss this with my fellow Scrum Masters at New 10 to hear them out, what was their outlook. And I think vulnerability always attracts vulnerability. So if you're open about what was that you were not comfortable with, people come up with so many of their own experiences that had gone wrong, and then you learn from each other. So it's like you don't have to really give advice to someone what could have been done right, but it's more of a storytelling that happens, and people then pick up the interesting parts out of it. What can be learned from these experiences, and how can I improvise on it? So the learning was be cautious about time management. And that is one of the most important things that I've learned. There are these small timers that are there in Miro, which can simply be used to, so the discussion can last longer than the time if it's interesting, if it is important. But the time is a reminder that if you are investing more time here, you might need to sacrifice the time in other sections. Are you ready for that? These are the small reminders. So making use of clocks, timers, superb. Documenting retrospective. After that, I have literally documented all my retrospectives, and it helps. Why did I choose this activity? Because what problem I thought would be solved by it? Did it really solve that problem? What were the interesting topics that the team has discussed? What was the thought process? So that really helps to give me context and go back in time to check what was the mindset of the team, at that point of time. Then, as I said, retrospective itself is also an opportunity to inspect and adapt, which is great. And I think we lose this important point at times. retrospectives can go wrong, the way our sprints can go wrong, that the way a feature can go wrong, and that's fine. That's the time where we have to inspect, make the changes, and improvise, and that is also applicable to a retrospective. Then making sure the team remains focused, does not go off track, and if that does happen, you should have the courage to call it off. So me engaging my team into a different game that was fictionally was not the right thing. I was just pressurizing to use that 1 hour, but if it is not going as expected, it's fine to call it off at times or just discard the things and start fresh. But that needs courage to admit that I did not think it is going the way we expected. So what do you think? Should we just leave it at this point? Should we discard this, write new stickies? Are you really interested in going to a next activity, or should we just drop it off here? And that's okay. That is absolutely okay. Being open to the team is really important when you're in doubt, and having a backup plan. I thought fictionally was a backup plan, but that wasn't. I really tried to pull everyone just to be there, which was kind of forceful, I thought, at a later point. And then comes the outcome. So I was quite critical about these things. I shared it with fellow Scrum Masters. I checked with the team. But the actual outcome of these retrospective was, during those 4 weeks, we didn't have a retrospective, but we still had the opportunity to inspect and adapt, and we did that. We did work as a team to improve. We did collaborate, and it was just that we had lost that one official chance of doing, but we were still messaging each other. We were still collaborating. We were still trying to do better, improvise. So even if that formal chance was lost, it was not that the team was just stuck at that point. We were still progressing. And I think this one failure helped improvise all the following retrospectives. Not just me, but the team also became quite aware about time management. And yeah, they came up with, why don't we just play some music when the timer is on? So that, it soothes us. Super, let's do that. So yeah, not just me, it was also helpful for the entire team, the learnings that we had from this retrospective that didn't go as expected. Then the team did work on the action items that were derived from the start sections discussions. It was not like we did not do anything. It was important. We highlighted, we discussed, and we started that. Super. And I think that is really important. If you are even able to do one single piece of work that takes you towards improvement, I think that's the whole point of retrospective. So that was my little story of how a retrospective went wrong and what were the learnings for me. What was the output and what was the outcome? So outcome is always the impact that a certain action or activity has, and output is just the fruit of it. So that is the basic difference. That's why I said it is outcome and output, that I've separated it in the slides. And just to start with this, I would love to ask my audience here. I've listed down a few questions because I cannot get such a nice audience every time. So I just wanted to even ask you, do you really think that a retrospective can go wrong? And as I said, no right or wrong answers. This is just your perspective. So I would love to hear what you have to say.
Yamini, so I would suggest to use this slide as a bridge to the discussion, to start the discussion. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. And before we move on to the discussion, I would like to ask you a couple of questions. First of all, maybe you could share a couple of activities that a Scrum Master should keep in their pocket for such a case when something went wrong or they are thrown into cold water and need to work with a completely new team. So maybe one or two, a couple of options, some activities that you might use for almost any situation.
So to answer that, Alex, when you're starting new with a new team or in a new company, it's a blank check. So I always say invest in that. It is the right time because I have been doing a Scrum Master role in 4 organizations and none of it was same. So everywhere I have to alter it as per the team, as per the company. So And everyone has different set of expectations from you. So this is the right time when you're starting new, have that discussion. What is expected out of you? What is that the team wants you to do? And then clarify. The team might just want you to bring coffee to the table. Yeah, that's superb. You would love me to do that, but that's really not my role. And then have that clarified discussion, because that is a point where you can align with the team, what they can expect out of you and what you are responsible for. So when you're starting new, I always recommend doing that. And for activities, I think I just don't start immediately because that is like even before testing the waters, you're doing something, some experiments with them. So I just lay low during the first few weeks, just understanding how the team operates, what are the regular things that they do, what events they have, what are different processes that they follow. But I love keeping notes of all of this, which really helps. So that's basically what I do when I start new.
Thank you. And you have mentioned self-organization and the sharing of the responsibilities with the team members. So could you tell us also a little bit about how do you promote, how would you suggest to promote this shared responsibility among the team members?
For the example that for time management, right? It was a thing that failed, and admitting it with the team that and someone said, yeah, I had kept an eye on the clock, but the discussion was quite important. So just making sure that, yeah, but next time if you find something, just say it aloud. We can say that, oh no, the discussion is fruitful. Let's just continue doing that. That's good. But if you find such things, just mention it. It's really good to share it with the team. That was one thing. To make the team more self-organized, I would say I use different techniques. For example, when we started with refinements, there were a lot of questions that came along, and gradually you improvise, right? So there was no cost factor that was added, but when we did a certain thing, the cost thing was, yeah, that's important for us. We have to mention it. So using mind maps. So there's no need for every individual to ask these questions. But if these are some standard questions, why don't we have a structure around it so that we don't skip on these questions? So there's no need of someone really taking that ownership that, oh, he was not there and he did not ask this important question, so we just skipped it. No, if these are important questions, you can just say that it is not applicable for the story, but just keep them ready, like cards, like mind maps, which need to be answered. If cost is part of your refinement section, then add it to a mind map, make a card of it. So making use of tools and techniques to make sure that the team is self-organized. So that is basically I try to do. Just 2 examples here.
Thank you very much. So let me switch off the recording and invite everyone to join the discussion.